There was a time when British lorries didn't whisper down the road, they thundered. The 1980s were the last decade of truly mechanical monsters. No emissions limits, no noise tests, no digital restrictions, just raw diesel, iron, and pride. The men who built them weren't trying to make them polite. They were building workhorses to haul, climb, and conquer. 15 of these legends stood out, trucks so bold, so brutal, that they'd never see the light of day under modern rules. First up, the Leyland Buffalo. Big, boxy, and unapologetically loud. Its engine note could shake shop windows, and its smoke trail followed it like a banner of honor. The Buffalo was built before efficiency became a word that mattered. It didn't sip diesel, it gulped it. Drivers loved it for one reason: it never gave up. You could throw it into any haul, any weather, and it just kept pulling. Today, it'd fail every emissions test within seconds. Back then, it passed every test that counted. Next came the Foden S10, built like it wanted to fight the road itself. It had steel where modern trucks have plastic and gears that demanded muscle to move. The two-stroke Detroit diesel versions were rare but unforgettable, screaming like banshees through the countryside, covering miles faster than anything else on 6 wheels. MOT inspectors would faint at the thought of that noise today, but in the 1980s, it was a symphony. The Foden wasn't built to behave, it was built to be remembered. The ERF E-Series deserves a place in any Hall of Fame. It was the truck that every British kid drew in their school notebooks, all square lines, roaring engines, and exhaust pipes tall as chimneys. Drivers loved the E-Series because it felt alive. The cab vibrated like a drum when you revved it, and the gearbox felt carved from stone. It leaked oil, smoked like a chimney, and made you feel invincible. Now, it wouldn't even make it through emissions testing, but in its day, it was Britain's backbone. Then there was the Seddon Atkinson 401, a lorry that looked angry even when parked. It was a favorite among long-haul drivers, big cab, massive torque, and a ride that made you feel like king of the road. The 401s hauled everything from timber to tankers, and they did it with swagger. Its smoke trail was as black as its trim, and that deep rumble from the Cummins engine could be heard 2 postcodes away. Today's inspectors would label it non-compliant. Drivers back then called it perfect. Another legend, the Leyland Road Train. This was the truck that defined an era. Born from the chaos of British Leyland, the road train still became one of the most iconic sights on the motorways. Sharp edges, bold stripes, and a cab that looked like it could take a hit from a tank. It was heavy, crude, and proud of it. When it pulled away fully loaded, you felt the road shake. By today's safety standards, it was prehistoric. No airbags, no sensors, no mercy, but the road train never needed permission to prove itself. The DAF 2800 was another beast that lived loud. Though Dutch at heart, it became a familiar sight in British fleets throughout the 80s. The 2800 had torque that could climb walls and exhaust stacks that howled through the night. The cabs rattled, the seats bounced, but the heart of that truck, the 11.6-litre engine, was unstoppable. Modern regulations would silence it in seconds, but the 2800 made men fall in love with the road. It wasn't comfortable, but it had character, and that counted for more. You couldn't talk about this era without mentioning the Scammell Commander, a military-grade brute that occasionally wandered onto civilian roads just to remind everyone what a real truck looked like. Used by the British Army and heavy haul firms alike, the Commander wasn't built for rules, it was built for war. Twin fuel tanks, low gearing, and power that could pull trains. It would never pass a weight restriction, noise limit, or emissions test today, but it didn't need to. It was the kind of machine that made modern trucks look fragile. And then came the ERF EC10, sleeker than its older siblings, but still carrying that British soul, raw, mechanical, and honest. The EC10 bridged the gap between the old world and the new. It had more comfort, yes, but under the skin, it was still a warrior. The Cummins L10 engine gave it the growl every driver wanted, and the cab design became iconic. It wouldn't survive under today's emissions laws, but in its time, it was a symbol of progress without compromise. The lorries of that decade weren't safe by today's standards. They had no traction control, no computers, no seatbelt reminders. But they had something else: grit. Every bolt was built with purpose, every design decision made by people who cared more about power than polish. They were dangerous, smoky, heavy, and loud, and that's exactly why drivers loved them. The 1980s built lorries that shouted, not whispered. They were raw, unfiltered machines forged in an era when power came before polish. These trucks didn't care about CO2 limits, noise levels, or safety ratings. They were born to haul, to climb, and to survive. In part 1, we looked at the first 8 monsters that defined the decade. Here are the last 7, loud, heavy, and proud, the kind of British beasts that would never make it past modern regulations. The Scammell Highwayman was already a legend by the time the 80s rolled around. It was a relic of post-war design that refused to die, built to outlast men, weather, and reason. Its steering fought you every mile, the clutch felt like lifting concrete, and yet it never stopped. It would never pass a modern ergonomics test or emissions check, but for drivers who like to fight, the Highwayman was a badge of honor. Then came the Leyland Octopus, a name that fit its personality. The octopus could crawl through muck that would swallow smaller lorries whole. Safety guards? None. Comfort? Forget it. It was a workhorse that looked like it was carved from the quarry walls it served. The Foden 4000 series took the old school muscle and gave it just enough refinement to fool people into thinking it was modern. Beneath the slightly sleeker cab sat a roaring heart that refused to behave. Drivers said you could hear a 4000 long before you saw it. Its 2-stroke Detroit diesel screamed like a banshee, spitting smoke thick enough to paint the air. Environmental agencies today would have a heart attack just watching it idle. The ERF EC12 pushed toward the 1990s but still carried the rough edge of its forefathers. It introduced a bit of comfort, padded seats, proper insulation, but the powertrain was still pure attitude. The Cummins engine under that bonnet had a bark that could shake depot windows. Drivers liked it because it still felt like a truck, not a computer. Every mile was physical, mechanical, alive. The Seddon Atkinson Strato tried to keep British trucking alive while Europe was moving on to sleek aerodynamics. It was unapologetically boxy, loud, and heavy. The Strato was one of the last trucks to carry that old school DNA, all straight lines and screaming engines. Its smoke output alone could darken the horizon, but when it rolled up, everyone knew work was getting done. Next was the Scammell S26, the brute of the heavy haul world. Designed for tanks, cranes, and loads that bent the laws of physics, the S26 could drag half a town if you asked nicely. Twin axles, low gearing, torque that felt infinite. Modern limits on axle weight, emissions, and noise would instantly disqualify it. Back then, it was the weapon of choice for moving Britain's biggest burdens. And closing this set, the ERF B series, a pure working class hero. Simple, square, and solid. It was the truck you trusted when everything else broke. The kind of lorry that smelled of diesel, sweat, and pride. The lorries of the 1980s weren't perfect, but they had something today's fleets will never recapture: soul. Machines that roared louder than the laws written to tame them, built by men who cared more about endurance than efficiency, loud, heavy, proud, and gone forever.